Welcome to Cursed TV, where shadows whisper and the night comes alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. Turn off the lights, relax, and let the stories begin. Story 1. Over the past few years, I've read quite a few stories regarding dolls who seemingly come alive and torment the family who owns them. Since the first story I read, I've been completely fascinated with the phenomenon. I worked through first-hand accounts of possessed dolls and many theories behind them before I finally decided to do an experiment of my own. From what I've learned, the age of the doll isn't particularly important, it's the amount of emotions you pour into it. Treat it like a living being and it invites spirits to take up residence, the theory being that they are jealous of the doll having the attention that they themselves cannot get. Another theory is that the amount of energy and emotion you pour into them creates a spirit of its own. These beings become violent when they are exposed to excess levels of stress, violence, fear, and anger. It seems to be a perfect storm of emotions and energy which provides the spirit enough energy to manifest and attack those who are feeding it the unsavory energies. My plan was to buy a doll. I decided on an American girl, Rebecca, who had no previous owner, straight from the factory to reduce the risk of emotional contamination. This was important because I wanted to be the only being it received emotions from. When I received it, I unboxed her immediately. I had a crafts room that my boyfriend, who is very pedophobic, never entered. He was effectively banned from the room because he tended to want to fiddle with the sewing machine and broke it more than once. The doll would be safe from him there. I then stopped calling the doll it and called her Zoe, a name I carefully selected due to its very basic meaning, life. This was a very important step. To bring her to life, I needed to treat her as a person, not a lifeless object, and it would not do. A name other than what came from her manufacturer was also important. At first, I spent an hour a day with her, brushing her hair, talking to her as though she were my own daughter, which I had not yet decided to have, having tea parties and playing games that I knew a small child would enjoy. These playtimes gradually began to take up more time as no signs of life appeared in her. It took 2 months for me to finally decide that love and affection were not enough to bring her to life. A person has more range than that, and thus she would need more diverse energy poured into her. When my boyfriend and I fought, I'm ashamed to admit I instigated quite a few in order to provide the food for my darling Zoe. I took him to the crafts room. We would stand just outside the door so that she could hear and feel the heated, angry energy that radiated off of both of us. I cried into her soft hair the first time he left. I had to pour the sadness into her. She needed the energy after all. There was one energy that I didn't quite have in me to show her. Although I am slightly arachnophobic, it wasn't enough to give her. It was then that I decided to start leaving her in places for my boyfriend to find. It would have been funny in a strange way if it wasn't for research purposes. The first night I got up after he had fallen asleep and carefully placed Zoe next to his bed. I explained what was going to happen very carefully to her. I didn't want her to be afraid when he screamed. I explained that he may throw her, but not to worry because it wouldn't hurt. Then I got back into bed and fell asleep with my darling Zoe, keeping an ever-watchful eye on my sleeping boyfriend. The next morning, I awoke to a bone-chilling scream and a loud thud. It was exactly the outcome I had predicted. He had awoken to see an unknown doll sitting next to him, staring at him in his sleep. He screamed and threw her against the wall. Without thinking, I rushed to her and lifted her carefully as I checked her over to make sure she was all right. That's when I finally recognized the anger my boyfriend was putting out. He was yelling, asking what was wrong with me. Why would I do that when I knew he was so scared of dolls? I didn't know what to tell him. I couldn't tell him about my experiment. He would tell me to end it immediately. He would never understand my need to produce this life. I held Zoe to me, and for a moment I felt like there was a small shift in her arm, as though she were trying to hug me back. I was incorrect, of course. Her arm had simply shifted down as I held her. My boyfriend packed up and left that day, shouting that I was insane and he couldn't take it anymore. I didn't have it in me to explain what was going on. How could I without sounding crazy? I decided it was time to take things to the next level. I told Zoe my plan, that I was going to buy a Ouija board and play with it with her, that I hoped that she would be able to talk to me soon. That night, I brought home the Ouija board. I laid it out in front of us on the coffee table and began. It seemed nothing was there for the longest time. No matter how many questions I asked, I never got a response. I began to wonder if it was because it was just me and Zoe, and she couldn't place her hands on the planchette. I went for some tea for the two of us, and by the time I came back, the planchette had moved. It was possible it would only move when I wasn't looking after all. It took many times of looking away and back again for the message to begin to become clear. Below is a transcript of the conversation that followed. Hello, is anyone there? Yes. Are you friendly? Yes. Does Zoe have a soul? No. Can you help me give Zoe life? Yes. Goodbye. It was a straightforward conversation and ended fairly quickly once I got the hang of looking away and back again. The days that followed escalated. I noticed Zoe move from place to place as I would enter and leave the house. Things were moved in the home, her toys in different places, crayons used for the first time. I was excited. I spoke to her more excited than I had in months. She seemed happy and content the way she was, the little girl I had hoped to bring to life. But I needed to know for sure. I called my boyfriend and told him that I was sorry, that I put Zoe in her room, and that he wouldn't have to see her again if he just came back. He somehow accepted my apology and arrived within a few hours. He kissed me, we made love, and had dinner. When we went to sleep, I left Zoe's door open and invited her to play in the rest of the house that night, that I wouldn't be angry if she did. Then I went to bed. My boyfriend, let's call him Fred, started commenting on things over the next week or so. The sound of shuffling down the hall, the sound of scratching at the door, tugging on the blankets. Then he would awake in a panic in the middle of the night with bruises decorating his arms from being pinched. It took all of a month for Zoe to start showing herself to him. He would scream and yell at me, accusing me of placing her in strange places. Why did I put her in the shower? Why was she in the kitchen holding a knife? Why was she beside his bed? So on and so on. I finally told him I was going away for a few days to go on a business trip. It was a lie, of course. I was going to stay at a friend's. I told Zoe that she had to stay with Fred for a few days and to try not to get into too much trouble. My phone blew up not 2 hours after I left. Strange things were happening. He no longer believed it was me that was causing them. The doll was dangerous. She needed to be destroyed before she hurt one of us. It was 3:33 a.m. when all of the messages stopped, and I never heard from him again. I came home the next day, expecting to see that he'd fled the house. I was surprised when I entered and saw him laying in the living room floor. The house was wrecked, and he had a chef's knife through his chest. Zoe sat next to him on the floor, a similar wound in her chest as well. I imagined that he tried to stab her after he freaked out, and she defended herself. I called the police immediately. They kept my Zoe for over a month before they finally gave her back. I told her it was okay, that it's all right to defend herself. She sleeps beside me every night now. I feel like she protects me just as much as I do her. But I wonder what will happen when I do eventually decide to end the experiment. Story 2. The fucking thing was buried in our backyard. Our goofy dog, Goofy, chanced upon it while he was out foraging for old bones entombed in the dirt. Deliriously excited at having found the hidden treasure, he bounded over to where I was relaxing on the deck and deposited the thing at my feet like a tribute. I furrowed my bushy brow. It was a doll, swaddled in dirty rags like an abandoned baby. Only it wasn't a baby at all. No, it was the bisque doll of an old woman. A crone, more like, with coarse silver hair, wrinkled skin that looked like aged leather, and a large hooked nose set above a mouth twisted in a malevolent grin. The sight of it turned my stomach. Something was just wrong with it. Something alive and vicious. Didn't need to be a fucking psychic to see it. As I touched its face and felt how doughy the flesh around its beady eyes was, all I wanted to do was hurl the fucking thing over my fence, or burn it, and dump the ashes in a sewer. Unfortunately, my son saw it before I could bring one of my many reasonable plans to fruition, and fell in love with it. Now I'm not one of those assholes who thinks toys are for boys and that dolls are for y'all's daughters, but there's no way I would have let my son play with that monstrosity. At least not if he hadn't made that face at me. You know what face I'm talking about, right? It's that thing these little shits do, where they scrunch up their face like they're about to cry, but never actually do so. You hurt me, Daddy, but it's okay. I still love you, and I will listen to you even though I want to cry. So I gave in. Fuck me, but I did. What an idiot I was. If I had known then what I know now, I would have sent my son's bratty ass packing to his room and taken my old hatchet to that porcelain bitch's face. God, it was terrifying how quickly and how hard he latched onto that thing. It became his favorite doll in an instant. He would carry it around everywhere, tightly tucked under his arm, when he was eating, studying, watching TV, or rolling around in the dirt outside. He even began talking it with him when he went to take a shit. Thankfully, I quickly put a stop to that. As disturbing all that was, it doesn't even come close to the fucked upness that was playtime. To hear him talk to that hideous creature in his sugar-sweet, unbroken by puberty voice, to watch him have tea parties with it made my skin crawl, like 1,000 spiders were tap dancing on my spine. I swear I could feel that doll's eyes following me around every time I would cross my son's room. And that grin. Vicious, mocking. It amazed me that my son wasn't shit scared of it. He even named it Gertrude. What the fuck kind of child names a doll Gertrude? And no, before you ask, Gertrude wasn't the name of his dead grandmother. We didn't know anyone named Gertrude at all. God, I wish I had thrown Gertrude into the trash compactor. Shit soon took a turn for the horrifying. It began small, things being misplaced, shoes not being where I had left them, dirty plates, slick with soap, magically turning up on our living room couch, taps gushing water, even after I had shut them off twice before. And then the noises. Nails scratching floorboards at night that I initially dismissed as rats throwing a rager in the crawl space. But there was a disturbing, almost deliberate rhythm to them, like whatever was making that noise wanted me to be aware of its presence, wanted me to come out and investigate it. Wisely, I would stay curled up in my blanket. When the nails weren't scratching, a low moan would issue, always in sync with the hum of the refrigerator, but more human than machine. Gone every time I would pay attention. Then hints of scratchy whispers in the fireplace, and painful sobs, both distant, like I was hearing them from the end of a long and narrow tunnel. It would be followed by a sudden tapping on my windows that would make my heart stop. Just stray branches of the old oak knocking on the glass. Or was it? Did it sound more like fingers, drumming playfully? Regardless, it scared the living daylights out of me. But it could all still be reasoned away. Rats beneath the floor, wind whistling through the chimney, rational explanations for seemingly unnatural phenomena. Nothing could explain the footsteps, however, or the giggling. It would begin from the end of the hallway, outside my son's bedroom. A prolonged creak of a floorboard, as if someone was cautiously taking a step. Then another board would shift, then another. Faster, louder. The slow footsteps would turn into a full fucking sprint at the other end of the hallway, before suddenly coming to a halt. I could almost imagine someone stopping on the tips of their toes just above the staircase, standing wide-eyed, breath tight in their chest. My heart would ripple as a giggle would follow. Childlike, but not exactly, as if someone very skilled was imitating a child. On the nights that I could muster the courage to investigate, nothing but shadows and silence would greet me. My son would always be fast asleep in his room, the blasted doll lying on the pillow next to him. It was another such night. Footsteps dashed across the hallway, and then that giggling. I swore and jumped out of the bed, ready to find nothing but darkness once again. My vision shrank behind a sea of dark spots as I noticed faint yellow light splashing out of my son's bedroom. Dull and soft, like a flashlight, had a cloth draped over it. I called my son's name as I padded towards his room. What I found in there turned my bowels to water. My son was standing in front of a tall figure seated on his bed, touching its mouth, his own wide open in awe, holding a flashlight in his left hand. "Adam," I spoke, softly. The figure turned and a whimper escaped my lips. It was the doll, come to life. blood made the flesh beneath the wrinkled skin flush as beady eyes gleamed under the glow of the flashlight. The thing opened its toothless mouth. "Daddy," it spoke in my son's voice. "Daddy, what's happening?" My spine shivered. I could feel my knees weaken like rotting legs of an old table. I tried to swallow my spit. "Adam," I said, "come here." My son didn't move. The creature touched its face. "Daddy, Daddy." The voice seemed to be testing something. "Adam," I said sternly. This snapped my son out of his daze. "Come here." I held my hand out as he took a tentative step towards me. The crone tried to stop him. "No, Daddy." I pulled my son into my arms and ran the fuck out of there. The monster started screeching. "Daddy, no, wait, Daddy!" I felt like crying. My son held on to me tight as I bolted down the stairs and made my way towards the garage, ignoring the heavy footsteps thudding behind me. The skin of my neck turned wet. He was crying. "Shh, it's okay, Adam," I said as I opened the door to my car. "Don't look at it. Just focus on my voice." The next time I saw the thing was in the rear view mirror of my car as I tore out of my driveway. It was naked now. Have you ever seen a naked old woman running at you? Nothing quite as frightening as that in this world, I'm afraid. Silver hair waving in the wind, saggy tits swaying like they couldn't wait to tear free, rolls of spotted skin flapping about, as repulsive as terrifying. I pushed down on the accelerator. Sweat beaded on my forehead as the beast sped up. It was as fast as a fucking gazelle. I could still hear it calling after me. "Daddy, Daddy." I didn't let up until I couldn't see it anymore, couldn't hear it calling after me. I didn't stop the car until the fucking sun crested the horizon. We never went back to that house, sold it through an agent and moved away from that town. The incident traumatized the shit out of my son. My bubbly little boy turned in on himself. He hardly talks, and when he does, he sounds exhausted, but at least he's still alive, and he has been getting better recently. I'm sure things will improve. I'm fucking sure of it. We're gonna leave that memory behind. Story. My name is Tamara Clarence. I am 34 years old the day I am abducted. It is important that you remember that. I am Tamara Clarence. I am 34 years old. I am not a doll. I am not a fucking object. I have a name. I am Tamara Clarence. I am 34 years old. I remember the world before I woke up here. I remember heaven before hell. I remember the man in the red coat. Above all else, I remember the man in the red coat, my stalker. I remember confronting him on the road, punching him, blood gushing from his nose, the way he squealed as he sat on the pavement and held his hands to his face. And I reached out to him, concerned for him, for myself, convinced I'd dealt him a litigious injury. And at that precise moment, my guard was wide open. My former boxing instructor would have smacked me across the back of the head for a mistake like that. In one blind, stupid moment, I'd forgotten everything he taught me. Never let your guard down. The man in red uncoiled from the ground, something silver and wicked glinting in his hand. An instant later, there is a searing pain in the side of my neck, and then a sense of falling into cold canyons and everlasting darkness, and a voice calling out to me from the far end of a rapidly expanding tunnel. "Ain't payback a bitch." After that, darkness, and then I wake up here. The first thing I become aware of is the sound of women singing, of hands massaging my flesh, dozens of hands, turning me over and over, and I'm helpless as an infant. I can't move, I can't cry out. I am made of elastic and rubber tubing, my limbs flopping, my head lolling, and from my throat this low-pitched moan that goes on and on. Voices whisper in my ear, "T, you are safe, you are home." I open my eyes with a tremendous effort and squint up into a circle of faces, but no features, not enough light, shadow faces, people gathered around me, singing softly, rubbing my body with hands that feel blind and unsavory. "What's going on here?" I groan. "Who the fuck are you? Where am I?" I try to sit up, but I'm too weak. My limbs flop, my head rolls. "Rest," one of the shadow people tells me. "Your strength will return." "I can't see," I tell her. "Bring light." Another shadow yells, "Let the newborn look upon her sisters." I'm ragdoll? The first shadow begins to stroke my hair. "You don't have a name yet, so we'll call you New Doll. Everyone is called New Doll in the beginning, before Monarch gives them a name." I summon enough strength to push her hand away. "I'm not a fucking doll," I hiss. "My name is Tamara Clarence, and trust me, hon, I'm one person you don't want to cross." Someone brings light, and I flinch from it. My eyes are weak, my hand instinctively rising to ward off the glare. It takes a few seconds to grow accustomed to the light, to realize it is feeble, no more than a small flame dancing on the end of a wooden faggot, but enough to see the faces of the people gathered around me. I reel back. I'm surrounded by some kind of freak show, emaciated women dressed in the ragged remains of party dresses and bridal gowns and maternity frocks, their faces pale and ghost-like and horribly disfigured, their flesh eaten away by acid or bacteria, jagged wounds, inexpertly stitched together, bruises and infection, and every one of them has the eyes of a raving lunatic. They look like a gallery of monsters. I start screaming mindlessly. I can't help myself, and the freaks all cover their ears and start screaming as well, which only serves to further fuel my panic. I leap to my feet and flee into the dark, tripping and stumbling over barely seen obstacles, tumbling down sudden drop-offs, and it soon becomes apparent I'm trapped in a rat's maze, surrounded by a frozen tidal wave of junk, bureaus and wardrobes, and ancient refrigerators and washing machines and sofas and pitted TV sets and the skeletal remains of prams. It is a graveyard of obsolete things. "Do not flee from us, child," one of the freaks calls after me. "All is well. All is as it should be." "Let me out of here," I shriek. "Let me the fuck out of here." I am naked and covered in some kind of viscous fluid, lost in a maze of old junk and half mad with terror, and the dark appears to be populated by refugees from a Hieronymus Bosch painting. Everything starts spinning. "Do not fear us, my dear." The freak's voice echoes all around me. "We are all sisters down here, in the dark." "Get me out of here." I collapse sobbing to the ground, and naked as an earthworm, I crawl through the muck. "I'm rich," I wail. "I've got money. I'll pay anything. Just let me go." I'm hysterical, barely coherent, scarcely aware of what I'm saying, and then my mind implodes, my thoughts snuffed out, and I curl into a dark niche and cover my head, whispering the words, "Help me, please," like an SOS on an endless loop. I am Yellow Doll, yellow, like a fading memory. Opening my eyes, I see an old crone of a woman squatting in front of me with matchstick arms folded over the hard bones of her knees. She is filthy and disheveled and dressed in rags, but unlike the other freaks, she bears no discernible disfigurations. She crouches in the glow of a nearby barrel fire, and when she smiles at me, the dirt that cakes her face cracks into 1,000 ancient riverbeds. I sit up. Several women have gathered around the barrel fire, staring blankly at me as they warm their hands. Beyond the women, beyond the fire, there is only shadow and cavernous ruin, and what looks like the crumbling artifacts of 1,001 attics and basements, and beyond these I hear the echo of water spilling from dozens of pipes. So much water, I imagine it must be raining somewhere far above me. The air is filled with the stench of rot and mildew. I turn back to the old woman. "Where am I?" I demand. "In the doll pit," the old woman says. I try to stand up, but my legs are too weak and buckle beneath me, and I sit down hard. I glare at the old woman. She continues to watch me intently. "You're holding me against my will," I tell her. "Not I." "Then whom?" She glances up at the shadows above us. "He only wants what's best for you," she says. I follow the direction of her gaze and lower my voice. "Who only wants what's best for me?" The old woman chews on her lips for a moment, and then she says, "The one who brought you here, the one who brought all of us here." "What is this place?" She nods as though she'd been expecting this question. "The place he keeps his dolls," she says with deliberate emphasis on the possessive pronoun. I try to understand this, to make sense of her words. "Are you a doll?" I ask. "Is that what you think you are?" "I am his doll." Again, she uses that strange emphasis, as though referring to some kind of personal deity. "How long have you been here?" She shrugs. "Years, perhaps, I don't know. I don't care. My life is now. My world is here." I stare into the shadows above me. "Are we underground?" "Yes." "Do you know how far underground?" "We are very far underground, child, further than you can imagine." As I stare at her, a cold shiver runs through me. In the low light, she looks like a child's discarded doll, something you'd find on a rubbish tip or in someone's backyard. Maybe once upon a time she had been beautiful. Maybe once upon a time someone had treasured her. But that time was long ago and far away. "Who runs this place?" I demand. "Who's in charge? You keep saying he. Does he control this place?" "He means you no harm." Is that what he promised the others? I'm sorry? Whoever disfigured them, is that what he promised them, that he wasn't going to harm them? Monarch remade us in his image. Who the fuck is Monarch? Again, her eyes flicker upwards. He is the illuminated one, Lord of the Atom. He's the psycho who kidnapped me? As I ask this, I recall the man in the red coat, sitting on the ground, squealing as blood gushed from his nose in ruby-red ribbons. He looked like a clown sneezing handkerchiefs through his nostrils. At the time, he didn't strike me as particularly illuminated. He did not kidnap you, child, the old woman says. He liberated you. First of all, don't call me child. It's patronizing. And secondly, this isn't liberation. I know what liberation looks like, and this isn't it. The world you lived in was the cage. The role you played was a lie. You don't know anything about me. You are daughter of Monarch, just as I am daughter of Monarch. He is the father and we the offspring, and he is harsh but fair, like any good father. How do we get out of here? Yellow Doll laughs. There is no way out of here. There's always a way out. The old woman stares at me and then she nods. You think you might kill yourself. You imagine you are free to take your own life. You are tempted by such an idea. If it's the last resort, he won't let you die. We'll see. The dolls are insane. I'm down here in the dollhouse and the dolls are fucking insane. This isn't real. This is a Freudian nightmare. This is a horror movie on steroids. We are being held in some kind of underground storage facility. It's about half the size of a football pitch. Maybe it's only a fraction of that size, but in the dark, there's no way to be sure. The walls are made of thick industrial steel, soot-blackened and webbed with pipes and cables that snake in and out of the shadows, and filthy fans turned behind huge ventilation grills set into the high ceiling. The whole place looks as though 1,000 generations of shit has been flushed down into it, mementos of a vanquished civilization, creating a molding forest of junk that spreads in every direction. A single set of steel stairs emerges from this sea of decomposition and leads up to a heavy, reinforced door. Blue light crawls around the edges of the door. The dolls tell me that Monarch comes when the blue light turns red. They tell me this with alarming regularity, as though the knowledge is encoded in their DNA, and the way they say his name, Monarch, as though pronouncing the secret name of God. In my despair, I try to get out. It is my first all-consuming thought. I pound on that door and scream until my throat is bloody and raw. Below me, the dolls laugh and clap. I threaten and cajole and curse and plead, but all to no effect. The door remains closed. The blue light does not turn red. I weep. The dolls weep. I'm not meant to be here. The dolls, the other girls, are nature's fodder, victims from the day they were born. But I am the predator, the wolf bitch. I am not meant to be caged. How dare I be caged? The stalker. More evolved than I'd given him credit for, this whole setup took time and infinite dedication. He never faltered, never relented. Not in all the years he's been carrying this on, snatching girl after girl off the streets. He's never slipped up, never, not in all that time. I am at the mercy of far more than a simple stalker. This one is a super predator. This one is top of the food chain. You can't get out of here, says the girl who earlier stroked my hair. I look up from the ground and flinch when I see her features. Half the girl's face is a mask of melted flesh, her hair plastered to her irradiated scalp in small clusters of gray, and the sign of a cross has been carved into her chest by a sharp, jagged object, the wound ghastly and cruel, despite the fact it has healed over time. Have you tried to get out of here? I demand, my voice hoarse with emotion. The girl squats beside me. In the beginning, she says, when I was like you, but then Monarch taught me to accept my fate. Well, my fate is getting out of here, I tell her savagely. She smiles. My name is Ragdoll. I bet it is. It's not so bad down here once you get used to it. The trick is to try not to remember stuff from the overworld. Try to forget the overworld ever existed. Listen to me. You're a prisoner. You've been kidnapped. All of you. If we work together, we can outwit this son of a bitch. He's only one man. He is more than a man. But less than a god. We can still beat him, but we have to work together, all of us. You are scared and disorientated. We all were when we first came here. We held on to our memories of that other place, and we tried to get out. Oh, we tried. We grasped at every straw, and we left no possibility unturned. But there was no way out, And in the end, we realized that our memories were false. There never had been another place. We'd always lived here. We just imagined that once upon a time we lived somewhere else. Do you remember your parents? I ask her. Do you remember your brothers, sisters, boyfriend, neighbors? Do you remember your boss at work, your coworkers, any of your friends or relatives? She makes a fluttering gesture with her fingers. They were all dreams, all fading, she says softly. Soon be gone, soon gone, all gone. Go away, I mutter. Suddenly I feel extremely tired. She reaches out and strokes my shoulder, and I recoil instinctively from her touch. Don't be afraid, she says. Get the fuck away from me, I hiss. As she walks away, Ragdoll sings in a falsetto voice, Monarch is the rising of the sun and the coming of the night. In the darkness of the pit, the other dolls repeat this phrase until it becomes a monotonous chant. Monarch is the rising of the sun and the coming of the night. Go away, I whisper. All of you, you're all fucking dead. And burying my face in my hands, I begin to weep. Time passes, although down here no time seems to pass at all. The door at the top of the stairs is red sun and blue moon, the light from another universe that waterfalls into this one. The door is my great terror, and conversely enough, it is also my one great hope. This is my way out. Somehow I must get out. I can't become like them, these human corpses. I can't give in. I have to get out before Monarch comes back, before the blue light turns red. Or else kill myself. The thought is ever present, and somehow it always calms me. There's always a way out. Always. I no longer want to escape. I want to hide from that dreadful creature at the top of the stairs, to bury myself in layers of filth and hide from the dreadful image of Monarch. I don't want to escape. Everyone should hide down here in the dark. Everyone should have a place to hide from their dead father. God knows I've found my niche in life. How many dolls down here with me? How many stolen lives? It's hard to tell in the beginning, but as I slowly begin to distinguish personalities, I take a head count of roughly 24. The number is staggering. 24 abductees, an unprecedented figure. If it made the news, it would be declared the crime of the century. How can one man hold this many women captive? There is Angel Doll, who uses a chain to haul a broken bureau along behind her. There's Mellow Doll, whose legs have been crudely amputated. She perches on the shoulders of Household Doll, who is blind and mute, and Mellow Doll guides her with a harness made out of Christmas tinsel. There is Iron Doll, who endlessly searches the fissures and crevasses for her lost child, and Lady Doll, who sings Amy Winehouse songs in the dark, and each doll was once a girl, someone with a name and a face and a dream to cherish. I sit in the dark and eat when summoned to the umbilicus by Yellow Doll. The rest of the time I just sit there, as far away from the stairs as I can get. I watch the other dolls dig away at the mountain of debris that fills one side of the pit. I don't join in. I'm not that mad. Not yet. A great nervous disorder periodically sweeps through the dolls. Every so often, they become hysterical, their faces contorting into hideous masks of anguish, and for no discernible reason, they start screaming and dashing about like mad ferrets, and then all at once they swoon, all of them simultaneously, like puppets with their strings clipped, and for long minutes there is silence, the girls lying stunned in the dark. Someone will invariably scream, "He watches us!" And then the dolls will jump up again, and the screaming and dashing about starts afresh. Other times, the dolls enter into a period of quiescence. They'll play make-believe for hours at a time, miming the act of taking a shower, or darning clothes, or cooking, or strumming on invisible instruments, or playing with non-existent children, their movements slow and precise, giving the impression that they believe they are actually participating in these activities, and all the while they chirp and twitter like birds. It is a community of lunatics sequestered down here in the squalor and gloom. They've gone feral. They live like animals, like a pack of wolves. Yellow Doll is the alpha female along with a few of the others. Moon Doll, Black Magic Doll, Baby Jesus Doll, all of them old before their time, and there's no rhyme or reason to their names. They appear to have been designated at random, or maybe Monarch has a sick sense of humor. The rats are the worst thing about being down here. The rats and the sense of not knowing what's coming next. I can imagine the door swinging wide. I can imagine Monarch standing at the top of the stairs in a blood-splattered apron and a butcher's hatchet in one hand, beckoning me with the other. And he's got this fucked up smile on his face, like the kind of smile a doctor wears when he's trying to reassure you about something he knows is going to hurt like hell. I can't sleep. The rats are all over you the moment you set your head down. I'm terrified of being eaten alive. Ragdoll says the rats won't eat me, but let's face it, Ragdoll isn't exactly dealing from a full deck. The rats are hungry and bold, and the girls have no qualms about eating them. Maybe sooner or later, the rats are going to get smart. Maybe sooner or later, the rats are going to get even. It is a dark metaphor. In a consumer-based society, everybody eats everybody else. What if Monarch cuts off the food supply? Will the girls eat each other? Monarch has complete control of this environment, which means that somehow I must gain complete control of Monarch. The place stinks, a rusting stink, a damp subterranean stench that gets right down under your skin and suppurates like some kind of metal-based gangrene. We eat porridge and cold beans that is periodically shunted down the umbilicus into the vat positioned beneath it, and we supplement this meager fare with rat's meat and blind insects. We devour everything. We scavenge and fight, and our language mostly consists of grunts and hisses, a Spartan vernacular stripped of vowels and laced with invectives. I have built a nest for myself that I fill with reminders of the overworld, the place I have come from. I desperately need the reminders: a bureau that rests on 3 legs, a stack of books to replace the missing leg, old faded pictures, a half-burnt lampshade, an ancient copy of Vogue. I defend this nest with tooth and claw. I can ward off 3 or 4 of the dolls at a time, but when they come in gangs, I have to give ground and go off in search of another nest. I've learned to bury things like a dog, hiding my most valuable possessions. But I know that if I am to survive down here, I need allies. Some dolls have adopted the masculine gender. They are aggressive and sexually assertive and prowl the camp in packs. They take what they want. They start the fights and end them. They beat the submissive dolls, the absolute bottom of the rung. Gang rape is not uncommon. Screams frequently punctuate the dark. No one interferes. No one cares. We are bugs in the weave of a monstrous carpet. Any moment now, a foot will come down and squash us flat. They light fires. Only the elder dolls get to light them. The rest of us huddle around for warmth. And Yellow Doll tells us there was no time before Monarch, that our memories are false, that we were born down here in the dark, and that this is where we will die. I tune her out, filling my head with loud music, the sneaker pimps and mid-90s Madonna, and the jingle to the Carphone warehouse ad, all the while staring at Yellow Doll's lips moving, and all the while trying to figure a way out of here. There is no way out of here. That's what they keep telling me. There is only one way into the world, a girl called Ghost Doll informs me as she points towards the rubber umbilicus that hangs from the ceiling, through the mother womb. Her finger moves towards the blue door at the top of the stairs. There is only one way out of the world, she says, through the jaws of the father. She smiles. She is blind, her face a mask of scars and shriveled flesh. I stare into the milky cataracts of her eyes and shudder. How long before I wind up like her? What else can they tell me about Monarch? They have mythologized him. No 2 descriptions are the same. Some of the dolls call him a bird demon with wings composed of night that can reach out and touch you wherever you hide in the dark. Others see him as an angel cast out of the world next door. He has saved them from that other place, the place where angels are driven to quiet despair. He is a child's fairy tale, the skinny man, the sacred shadow, the lord of the atom, 1,000 names but no face. No one can describe him. No one can tell me whether he is heavy-set, small-framed, blonde, black-haired. Is he Caucasian, black, Asian, old, young, in between? What accent does he have? What does he fucking sound like? It occurs to me there could be more than one monarch. It occurs to me there could be an entire cult of monarchs working in relays to give the impression there is only one. But why? Slavery? Towards what end? Even slaves need to be productive. These girls provide nothing. If anything, they are negative equity. The food must cost. Keeping them down here, monitoring them, the man-hours involved are simply enormous. And then again, there is the risk. More than 24 girls kidnapped from various parts of the country. Stuff like that doesn't go unnoticed. Sooner or later, the net begins to close. The girls have been abducted over a long period of time. The oldest ones might have been here for years. Their abductions staggered to prevent the police connecting the dots, forming a pattern, and that takes an inordinate amount of planning, because if there's one thing the police are particularly good at, it's connecting the dots. What happened to Melinda Grady? I endlessly fret about this, consumed by guilt that I didn't help her, couldn't help her. At the same time, I am haunted by the memory of her being dragged screaming through that demonic door. Christ, what's he doing to her? A girl called Sundoll tells me that every now and again, Monarch takes a girl away. Sometimes she's returned, she says, sometimes she's not. Sometimes she's returned, sometimes she's not. The umbilicus trembles and groans as a body is shunted along it. Makes me think of a royal egg pushed through the fleshy abdomen of a queen termite, and the abdomen hangs suspended above us, shitting the next generation of doll into the pit. I move with the other dolls to see who will arrive. Black Magic Doll beats her trash can against the ground. Yellow Doll raises her hands, fingers clawed, her mouth a silent scream. A body emerges from the mouth of the umbilicus and plunges into the vat immediately below. Soft plop. Instantly, we surge forward and grab the newly arrived doll and pull her body out of the vat. We wipe the goo from her face, and only then do I recognize her. It is Melinda Grady, barely recognizable, her face eaten away by some corrosive substance, her body covered in an appalling array of injuries. "There's nothing to be afraid of," Ragdoll croons into Melinda's ear. "You are Little Doll, daughter of Monarch. You have been delivered back among your sisters. You are beloved. You are Little Doll, daughter of Monarch." Melinda wears an idiot's smile, her eyes vacant and empty as she looks around. "Melinda?" I call out to her. She smiles at me. "I'm Little Doll," she says. "What's your name?" I can barely look at her injuries. I feel like throwing up. "It's me, Tamara," I croak. "I'm Little Doll," Melinda says again in exactly the same tone of voice. "What's your name?" I push my way through the circle of dolls and thrust my face right up to hers. "Melinda," I hiss. "It's me, Tamara Clarence. Remember, we're friends." Melinda nods, and for an instant she seems touched by some distant memory. Her eyes flare with recognition, her lips part to speak, and then the light abruptly dies in her eyes, and her features become blank again. "I'm Little Doll," she says in that same wooden voice. "What's your name?" Story 4. It all started a week ago. Someone put a timeout doll at our local playground. If you're not familiar, they're life-size dolls that look like children in timeout or playing hide-and-seek. They lean face-first against the wall, hiding their faces with their hands. You only ever see the back of them. Some are handmade, using old kids' clothes, a hat, a wig, and some straw for stuffing. The first time I saw one at the playground, I thought it was a real kid. So did my 5-year-old. He went up to the thing and asked, "Want to play hide-and-seek?" It didn't move. I watched from the bench, fear sinking in. Why isn't that kid moving? He, or she, it was hard to tell from the longish blonde hair and bucket hat, was leaned against the green plastic tunnel that Ryan liked to crawl through, just standing there, totally still. But as I approached, I saw the plasticky shine of its curly blonde hair, the snow-white neck poking out from the shirt's collar. I raised my hand and slowly gave it a poke. It wobbled against the tunnel. "It's a doll." My stomach dropped. Is this someone's idea of being cute? It felt like something an 80-year-old granny would do. The type that likes Precious Moments figurines and buys those hyper-realistic baby dolls. Or maybe it's a prank. I could see a group of teenagers leaving it here, just to freak out parents. Maybe they hide in the bushes and film people's reactions and put it on their TikTok or something. Either way, it creeped me out, just standing there, totally still, leaned up against the tunnel like that. Its face lined up perfectly with one of the circular holes cut into the tunnel wall, like it was peering inside. "What is it?" Ryan asked, staring at it. "It's a doll. They call them timeout dolls, because they look like they're in timeout," I replied. "Oh." Then he got on his hands and knees, and before I could stop him, scooted into the tunnel. "Ryan? Hi," he said, his voice echoing in the plastic. "Do you want to play? Come on." "It has no face." "Why does it have no face?" "Come on, get out of there," I said, the uneasiness in my stomach growing. He finally popped his head out and smiled at me. Can we make sandcastles? Sure, I replied. I hated making sandcastles, getting sand all over my jeans, but it was loads better than dealing with this creepy doll. A few days later, when we went back to the playground, it was still there. The after-school crowd was there, running up the jungle gym and racing down the slides. But there was one child that was standing still among the commotion. That stupid doll. It was in the same place as before, leaned against the tunnel. I whipped around, half expecting to see some giggling teenagers filming us, but there were only tired zombie parents glued to their phones, chaotic kids racing across the mulch. I went back to my phone, scrolling through the news. When I looked up a minute later, the doll was in a different place. It was now leaned up against the slide, hiding its face against the green plastic. My heart sank. One of the kids must have moved it, I thought. I glanced around at all the screeching, whooping kids. Right? I waved to Ryan, about to go down the slide, and put my phone away. I didn't want to take my eyes off him anymore. He waved back, grinning toothily, his bright yellow hat sticking out among the crowd. But there is always something to distract us from our kids. Dirty dishes in the sink, unread emails. There's always something tugging at our sleeve, crying for our attention. And for me, today, it was a phone call. As I answered my client's questions about the logo and branding images I designed for her, my eyes strayed from the playground. And when I looked back, I couldn't see Ryan anymore. I dropped the phone and stood up. Ryan? Nothing. I ran around the side of the playground, and that's when I saw his yellow hat. Not on Ryan, on that fucking timeout doll. It was now leaned against the rock-climbing wall, hands covering its face, shirt softly rippling in the wind, blonde, shiny curls poking out from my son's hat. My blood ran cold. Animalistic fear pounded through my veins. This is wrong. So wrong. I opened my mouth to scream for Ryan. We switched hats. I whipped around to see Ryan standing there, perfectly fine, wearing the doll's bucket hat. I let out a breath, sunk to my knees. Thank God you're okay, I said, voice warbling, pulling him in for a hug. I'm okay, he replied, confused. Can we go on the swings? Okay, but first, let's switch your hats back. Barely looking at the wretched doll, I reached over and yanked off the yellow hat. Put its hat back on, I told him, and then we made our way to the swings. I spent a while there, just pushing him, enjoying the sunny, if cold spring day. The tension began to melt away. Ryan was safe, and everything was fine. Eventually, as the sun began to set, we made our way back to the parking lot. As I mentally thought through the steps of preparing dinner, I needed to cut up some carrots, and did we remember to buy heavy cream? Ryan tugged at my sleeve. Why is it there? No, the doll. It was now at the edge of the parking lot, leaning against a tree. One of the kids must have moved it out here. Why? They probably thought it was funny. Come on, let's go. We quickly got in the car and drove home. That night, I decided we'd go to a different playground for a few days. The doll was freaking me out too much. Yeah, maybe it was irrational, but no one said we had to go to that playground. I'd take him to the one in Edgewood tomorrow. As I put Ryan's hat away, I noticed several strands of curly blonde hair stuck inside. Actually, more than several. I pulled them out, my stomach turning a little, and then threw them in the trash. Then I sat down, settled in, and took a sip of tea. Just as I was finally relaxing, I heard Ryan's voice upstairs. Mom! I dropped the cup of tea and ran up the stairs. Mom! Mom! He continued yelling, fear threading his voice. I burst into the room. Ryan was cowering in the corner of his bed, covers up to his neck. It's in my closet, he whispered. What's in your closet? I asked, fear pounding through me. The doll. No, it's gotta be a nightmare. I paced towards the closet. The door was ajar, the darkness spilling out of it. With each step, my heart sank further. It can't be, just a nightmare. I sucked in a breath and swung the door open. No, it wasn't a nightmare. There, in the darkness, stood the timeout doll. It was leaned against the hanging clothes, pressing its face into Ryan's shirts. Its blonde curls shone softly in the darkness. I raced over to Ryan and picked him up out of bed. We're getting out of here, I said, charging out of the room and towards the stairs. It wasn't a possessed doll. Those don't exist. Someone had put the doll there, which meant someone was in our house. Mark. It could be Mark. Some sort of sick, twisted way to get back at me for getting the house in the settlement. Did he still have the keys? I raced down the stairs, Ryan bobbing with each step. When I got to the landing, I glanced back. No, 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 no. The doll was at the top of the stairs now, face pressed into the wall. I raced to the front door, grabbed the doorknob, yanked it open, glanced back. The doll was on the landing, and was that a shadow next to it? Someone standing there? I ran across the front yard towards the neighbor's house. I pounded on the door, crying, "Let me in! Someone broke into our house! Please!" As I took a final glance at our house, I saw the doll leaned against the oak tree in our front yard. The police didn't find anything. No doll, no evidence of a break-in. With nothing to go on, they left, telling me they'd call if they got in touch with Mark. Ryan and I are staying at a friend's house for a few days while we get our bearings and try to figure out what's going on here. But I'm worried, because last night, when I went to check on Ryan to see if he was asleep yet, I found an empty bed. Ryan was standing in the corner of the room, leaning against the wall, hands over his face. "What are you doing?" I whispered, tugging at his arm. "Go back to bed, now." He turned towards me, hands still pressed against his eyes. "He isn't in timeout, Mommy," he said. I stopped in my tracks. "What?" "He's playing hide and seek," he continued. "Now he's hiding, and it's my turn to seek."